wishing you all a super warm welcome to Connecting with Purpose, where we connect with winners and thought leaders from multiple sectors to provide you with a 360-degree view on purpose. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Our purpose, to inspire you to unlock your potential and optimize your performance and impact. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to Nell Derick Debevoise, who's joining us for episode 7 of Connecting with Purpose. Nell, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, Mark. So happy to be here. And lucky 7, I didn't know. That's even better.
You are indeed, yeah. Which puts the pressure fully on me, not on you. So for our listeners, we're going to pop Nell's bio into the notes here. It really is incredibly impressive. Some of the best educational institutions in the world, and for the last 13 plus years, has been the founder of Inspiring Capital, which is an amazing organisation. How I know now, that's doing some incredible work as a B Corp, based in New York City, with organisations all around the world, changing the way we view capitalism and all of the good things that we can actually accomplish together. All of which have been coincidentally grounded in purpose. And so we're really excited to have Nell here. She's got a new book coming out, excerpts in the fall, and actually the full version being published for February next year. So we're excited to hear her talk about that and learn from her experience and amazing career and the impact that she's had. So Nell, thanks again for joining us.
Total pleasure. Thank you for that.
As you, I think, are aware, being lucky number 7, you're not the first person to get to dive into your career through magic moments. But as I said, we'll put the bio in the notes. But if you could pick out 3 magic moments from your career, and just to give you a little context on those, or for anyone listening for the first time, we think of magic moments as being benchmark experiences. If you were to give them a score upon reflection, you'd give them a 10 out of 10. And that's because they were pivotal in your development in some way, in shape or form. And the challenge for you is 3 magic moments. What was it that made those magic moments? What was it made the magic? And if you had to give them a name, what would you call them?
I love this way of introduction, so thank you for the creativity. I called them, which we'll get to later, but I have 3 moments that I called me, we, and world. As you know, that's kind of our organizing principle that I think you all use as well. And I realized that was, that so many things came to mind, so many moments, so many stories. And so that was what I realized I could kind of use to organize. So the me moment, that I want to highlight was about 4 years ago. I had the chance to travel to Ecuador with some coaches and guides from the US who partnered with some incredible local guides, mostly indigenous in Ecuador, around the Quito area and up in the rainforest. And it was, just an incredible journey in so many ways of nature. There was some rainforest medicine and healing ceremonies involved in that time. And it was just a really eye-opening 2 weeks about me on the me level, and so specifically we spent 3 nights in the rainforest. We had to hike in about 20 minutes to join this community who have been living there for 13 generations, I believe was the timeline, and they're part of the global seed collective of really trying to preserve the biodiversity of the Amazon rainforest, and they also practice plant medicine, and so we were able to do ayahuasca ceremonies with them for 3 nights in a row under this millennia old tree, and with these amazing rainstorms and just out, and the connection that I got to nature, but also history and human globalness, and my true self was just absolutely life-changing. So that was my me magic moment. It was a 12 out of 10 at least.
Well, actually, that's the highest score anyone's given one. So you've won that competition without even knowing it.
Number 2 is the we level, and this was in the debrief of some work that we did with American Express. 3 years ago, perhaps. We were working with their B2B marketing team, which was having some challenges with turnover and engagement on what had always been a very purpose-driven and successful team, but they'd had some turnover in leadership. And so they came to us for some help. And so in the debrief, talking with the leadership team about what we had done, which was, weeks of assessment, quantitative and qualitative, really going through their culture data and then doing our own research, and then pulling together some training, some workshops and engagement programs for their team. She said that the work, the ahas and the transformation that we were able to do with this team were, in her eye, about $500,000 worth of a McKinsey engagement, right? And here we are, this new, it was one of our first B2B engagements. We started out really direct to consumer, and then about 2018 shifted to serve companies as well. And so to get that feedback was just, really validating and inspiring. And of course, it had been all the way along for me. I remember so vividly one of those sessions being in the room and just seeing these ahas pop up and telling the leadership team this kind of root cause that we had diagnosed of this turnover and this cultural challenge that had really been driven by a rebrand at Amex that no one had dug into and been able to notice because they weren't asking these questions about purpose, right? About why do you show up here? What are you doing? And we were able to do that, as you can probably imagine, on a much lower budget, unfortunately, than the value we barely delivered. But nonetheless, it felt really magic, like, wow, there's a there, and motivating to keep doing the work.
Question: did you change your pricing structure after that?
Good question. That's a whole nother podcast. I try to, we work on a very sliding scale, as you know, right? When we worked with you in your former life, that was not the kind of prices that we were talking about. But when we're dealing with corporates, we try to imagine, what our competitors, which in some cases is a McKinsey or whatever. And, it's just a whole different stratosphere as far as I can tell. Yes, we do try to really step up and value. I'm big on value pricing, and it's not about the cost and our hours or whatever. I could never dream an hourly rate for myself that would get anywhere near what I know people are willing to pay, but I know the value. In that case, there was one very specific potential departure of a relatively senior person that was averted, and who knows how many others, right? But if the cost of turnover is 1 to 1.5x at that kind of mid-manager level, I know, that was a $250,000 salary probably. So boom, there's the value,
Exactly. Sorry, I'm taking you off track.
No, it's good.
We could have a whole podcast on value-based pricing.
It was my favorite class in business school. And then the third is on the world level, and this one actually goes back to about 1992. And so that was the moment when I was 12 years old and I was graduating from my urban elementary school in Hartford, Connecticut. And in the months leading up to this graduation, my mom primarily had realized that the public middle school that I was districted to go to in Hartford was essentially a war zone. Not only was it not a quality education, but it was rife with drugs and teenage pregnancy and violence and crime at the middle school level, right? So 13-year-olds and up. And she had always been we were all deeply embedded in our community and deeply committed to that. But at that point, she just wasn't willing to put my education on that path. And so I remember vividly, she said, well, there's some private schools. You can shop around and look at private schools, or we can move. So I did visiting days or whatever at a few of the schools around. One was very kind of Montessori and hippie, left over, and the other was quite more traditional prep school, headed to that whole world. And I came home and said, I don't want you guys to pay tuition. Let's just move. That feels too weird. So 12-year-old economics, not realizing that buying a house to move also has some economics involved, but forgive me that, but I just, the private school thing didn't quite jive. And, so again, a whole other podcast about public-private education in the US. But the point was that we moved 400 yards because that was over a town line. And now we were in the leafy green suburb, coincidentally, where my mom had grown up and my grandparents still lived. And I went off to public school there, and there were guidance counselors, and there was a peer mentoring program, and there were 37 APs for me to choose from, and off I launched to Harvard. And not to diminish my own effort and, innate intelligence or parental support or whatever else, and systematic privilege of being a white suburban female. But nonetheless, I saw my classmates go a very different way, and so that was it was a series of moments that's less of an individual incident, but it was this very profound firsthand experience that talent is absolutely distributed equally and opportunity is just not.
Yeah, I mean, then there's probably a book in that, 400 yards to your future, right? I mean, it's just that little bit of geographic difference and a complete life-changing opportunity through the education that you were given from that point on.
So arbitrary.
It's that, because they didn't have that same opportunity, and it's different situation, different surroundings, different people. Unbelievable. And I'm super passionate about trying to level the playing field on those educational opportunities for young people in the small way that we were able to do it in my past life. And obviously at Inspiring Capital, you've done some of that incredible work as well. And we're gonna dig into that in a little bit. But I wanted to just go back to one of the things you said in the first, your very first magic moment, the me one, because you said that the connection to self was life changing. Massive words. I guess where were you at in your sort of development there in terms of your career and your focus on purpose and everything else, and or your education, depending on when this was, but what was it that made it life changing in terms of how you took that forward from that point on?
This was now, 6 months or 8 months after closing the round. Nothing huge, very values aligned investors, so it certainly wasn't like, okay, great, now the hockey stick to IPO is the clock is ticking. It was a bit more gentle than that, but more pressure than I've ever felt. I'm very comfortable. I like making money and earning money for my company and for myself, and feel very comfortable reinvesting that. But the pressure of having other people's money based merely on faith in me or the concept and the team felt very different, and it was scary and stressful to me. And so I had been working with a coach before, during, and after the round, who I really valued and respected. She built a lot of the really groundbreaking messaging for women's product at Nike around, the goddess campaigns that they did, and this very powerful early women's empowerment stuff. And then decided that she didn't want to sell shoes anymore, went on her own purpose journey, and was now doing this coaching work, including with these partners in Ecuador. And so when she mentioned this trip, I was just like, yes. And, honestly, I had barely sort of heard about ayahuasca in some kind of joke startup. I don't know, it was probably in one of the TV shows or something, mocking Silicon Valley. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know the full agenda, but I just trusted her, and I knew it was time for some work. So I show up for these 2 weeks and just dove in. Again, I had no expectations, no background, really, except for trusting this woman and knowing I needed some help. And I think why it was life-changing was because I saw and felt and heard from the various healers and experts and coaches that we worked with this deep sense of true self and the connectivity of that to the universe, right? And that it's we're not alone. We're not, isolated little atoms. It really is so much deeper and broader than that. And, we're on our journeys doing what we're doing. And I do believe in autonomy and choice for sure. And there's this bigger context, and there's long history before it. And there is brilliance in the natural systems that we could never hope to fully replicate, right, in our constructed human ways. And so I think just having that that awareness, that feeling, that knowledge forever, I hope, certainly 5 years later, it feels strong and vivid, is something to come back to in all of the moments of challenge or fog or discouragement or frustration or trying to cover payroll or figuring out value pricing or losing contracts or winning scary, all the moments, right? That it just feels like this little star or fairy or fire or something in my gut that is mine, and having that has been incredibly powerful.
Thanks for sharing that, and because I think it's really powerful, and in terms of just giving you that context and perspective, right? And it's really about perspective. It's just giving you this massive perspective that enables you to put every little win or little challenge into that context. And it doesn't necessarily make it any easier to get through it at the time, but it enables you to move on from it and to be able to connect dots back together again and not get lost and completely overwhelmed in something without that perspective, because that's often when we get so sort of tunnel vision. And I suppose it's actually a nice segue into your book. Not that it's all about nature, but about purpose. And that I think, from my perspective, that purpose is this sort of both anchor and grounding force and foundational thing upon which we can build, but also the North Star at the same time. And I always talk about it as being kind of both things. That if for nothing else, provides you with some perspective to the what and the how and the day to day and the focus and how you live your life. So your book, Going First, which is finding the courage to lead purposefully and inspire action, is about primarily purpose-driven leadership in a capitalist world that we live in. What were some of the things, I suppose, key insights that you got from all these incredible interviews you've been doing with CEOs and other leaders, that you've kind of learned from these people, and that maybe provided you some perspective on leadership in a similar way to how that life-changing experience provided you with nature and the ecosystem that we live in?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is just the meta learning, which is that the response and the willingness to talk about this from people has blown me away, right? So when the publisher greenlit it all last winter, the mandate was, love the content, all good. Yes, it's a great time for this. Now go interview 100 CEOs or CXOs who are doing this, who lead this way, so that you can really juice it and make it really actionable and concrete. So I said, okay, 100, that sounds like a lot. Well, Mark, we're on, I think, 112 with 35 more in the books, and it's the CEO of Accenture and Figs and Grove Collaborative and Seventh Generation and Ben & Jerry's, as well as Black and Bold Coffee and Water Bear and these smaller companies and everything in between, right? So we just were like, we need to get all this input and information, and so have pushed out the schedule a bit more. So it just is so timely, right? Post-COVID, everyone thinks that there's such an opportunity right now to change, and so they're really eager to share their learning, their challenges, Anyway, so that's kind of the meta thing that has been incredible. So the book is called Going First: An Invitation to Find the Courage to Lead Purposefully and Inspire Action, which is a bit of a tweak, because that was one aha that solidified my thinking in talking to all these people, was that it's hard, it is challenging, right? And find the courage felt like a dare almost, or a challenge. And while I feel that in some ways, what I actually want is this sense of invitation of like, folks, come on over. Like, it is hard and it is different. And so it requires a different way of waking up in the morning, and it requires some intention and effort, which gosh knows is we're all really strapped and stressed right now in terms of our attention and our willpower and our worry. But there is such a good thing waiting on the other side in those me, we, and world dimensions, right? For ourselves, it's happier, it's less stressed, it's less anxious, it's more happy and balanced, and then for our teams and for our companies, the research is there, like great resignation. You know what the best antidote is? Remind people or help people figure out why they're doing what they're doing at your company. For them, I promise they'll stay longer. I promise, right? And then the results are there also around financial performance, right? That companies that are plugged in to the factors that are material for their impact in the world do better in the long term, right? So there's that. And then finally the world, right? We just heard code red. It's not okay. The climate is on a really scary downward spiral, and some of that is a foregone conclusion, but there is a sensitive moment here when we can make a difference and not send our grandkids off to Mars or I don't know, the mountains in, constructed environments. I don't know what the alternative is. And leading purposefully gets us to that really cool place. So yes, there's some challenge and there's some hard work that needs to be done to get there. But it is so worth it, in that deep happiness way. I just am rewriting the piece around happiness, and, that purposeful leadership is not about being happy in like a cotton candy kind of way, because it is hard and demanding and different. But it's happy in that Greek, like the word in Greek is eudaimonia, which is this like deep sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. And that's what leading purposefully gets you to.
What we call the purpose fused formula, which is how we look at individual purpose more than the organizations, where we go a slightly different, deeper dive. But
right.
But we talk about purpose being passion plus impact plus application. And ultimately, if you look at the intersection of those three circles, and you're always looking at what are the things you're passionate about that also can have impact? And then it's kind of, well, so what? So what are you going to actually do that on a day-to-day basis, or this month, or this year? And how does it affect your personal life, professional life, philanthropic, like all the different ways that you can show up in this way. But the words that the second dimension on that is sort of like living the dream, it's fulfillment and it's happiness. And that it's not just about happiness. So much of life's about meaning, and fulfillment's a big part of actually, living with meaning and doing meaningful things, because you do feel very fulfilled, but you probably feel happy as well, especially if you're doing things that you're passionate about. So it's really cool to hear that your perspective on that is similar to ours, but your perspective has been shaped by 112 C-level executives with another 35 on the waiting list. What were maybe some, without having names or anything, but I mean, what were some things that surprised you? When some people said that you're like, oh wow, I was not expecting that, or aha moments, or things like that just were really profound or impactful insights that people gave you that you just weren't prepared for.
Yeah. So good news, I think there weren't a ton of surprises, I wouldn't say, right? It has really been this like just privilege and intellectual journey of refining, consolidating, connecting ideas that I've been having and seeing over the last 10 years. Most concretely, it goes back pretty concretely to my master's thesis in 2003, so there's some history there, but so it's just been amazing to see it converge. And I think what's interesting about that is that, my deepest work has been with early career folks and then mid-career folks. And so hearing it now sandwiched at the CEO level is very cool, because it just reinforces the point that I've always made, which is that this is so human. It's not a millennial thing, it's not a senior life wisdom thing. It's a lifelong journey that applies to all humans, regardless of industry, regardless of, the folks I talk to are all CEOs. So that's obviously a narrow group to begin with. But beyond that, the diversity is pretty bonkers, in every way, demographic, but also, thinking styles and geographic and size of company and stage of company and age. So that's been awesome, really, really powerful, I think. Another loud and clear thing was that this really is simple. It's not easy, but it really is simple. And so, it's, we talk a lot about, start somewhere, and perfect is the enemy of the good. Like one theme that keeps coming up is like the grandmother test, right? And so basically it's like, when you go home, would you be happy to tell your grandmother or your grandkids or, whoever that human is, what you did today and the decisions you made? Because kind of that's what it comes down to, right? I don't want to underestimate the complexity of carbon capture and supply chains, and that's all very technical and real. But if you've got that core simple sense of like, I would feel good sharing this decision with my grandmother, you're probably doing the right thing about carbon capture, or hiring the right technical expert, whatever it might be. And I think the final thing just comes back to the title tweak, which is this notion that like, yeah, it takes effort. And it is so gosh darn worth it because of the power of what you can do and the contentment and the satisfaction and the calm, really, that you can feel as a result of living and working in this way.
Yeah, no, and every grandmother would support that. I think grandmothers have got a lot to answer for, actually, because I think that you could also argue that if you were to do your own purpose discovery work and then come up with a purpose statement, which needs to have a bunch of other pieces to it, but that can be your kind of grounding statement. That kind of needs to pass a grandmother test as well, right? Like if she can understand that, she gets it and she's like, "Oh, good for you," and you're like, "All right, okay, I got it right. That's good." So, so whether this is based on your own thoughts, because as you said, you obviously got an incredible academic background in Cambridge and Harvard and actually probably a bunch of other places, but they were the two that really hit home to me. I was very, wow, well done, amazing. But thinking about being a purpose-driven leader, whether it's what your view has been that you've refined, or whether there's just some common themes that have come through, from the interviews you've had, what does leading with purpose mean to Nell?
Yeah, we've really boiled it down. I talk all the time about my fellow Hartford resident, Mark Twain, right? Had the quote that if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. And so, 10 years into the work with Inspiring Capital, or 20 years into my thinking and studying about this, it's come down to this me-we world, right? And so really we can define purposeful leadership as being really intentional about the impact of my choices and my behavior in these me and we and world dimensions. Yeah. Right. And it absolutely starts, one of our frameworks is a graphic image of it. And the base, the foundation is me surrounded by family and friends. Right. And it's very intentionally those elements of it, because I'm just so clear, and so many brilliant writers and thinkers are so clear about this idea that, if I and all the eyes around me, right, my colleagues, my family, my friends, but if I am not well, body, mind, spirit, nothing that I'm doing is going to be ultimately very, very, very impactful in the long term, right? You can kind of suck it up and grind or whatever, and perhaps, pay a few things forward in the short term, but long term, it's not sustainable. Yeah. And so I think that's, that's the second point of purposeful leadership, is that it really does start with the me. And that means, baseline care, but it also means self-awareness and doing the work of like, what's my crazy, right? We're all crazy, like no questions asked, right? And not to diminish, obviously there's clinical mental health categories that are very real and serious, but all of us we're unique, perhaps is a kinder word. And it's really important to know how. how are you unique? Because it matters, and it's beautiful. And as long as you're aware and managing for it and around it, that's what we want. I want you to be your most unique. I don't want you to just fit into the mold of what you should be. But it takes time. We have such loud, strong messages about what a leader is, or what a professional is, or what a good man or good woman or good, and so you have to do that peeling back of the onion and getting quiet and listening so that you have that me foundation. And then you can worry about your decisions on the we and the world levels.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why people are actually going through an intentional, well thought out purpose discovery process that isn't just about answering a few questions on the back of an envelope, but actually a deeper dive into self-reflection, self-awareness, and looking at other people's perspectives on how you got here, and also fast forwarding probably to the end and looking back and what you'd be proud of is such a powerful thing to do, and such a challenge, I think, for a lot of people to do when they get stuck in the sort of the grind of the day-to-day of work in what is an incredibly competitive world. And we both spent a lot of time in New York City, which is probably one of the heights of competitive world. As somebody that's been so interested in this for so long, you essentially founded Inspiring Capital as an extension of your me to support me in the world piece. And I'd love for you just to chat through that a little bit. It's been 10 plus years now, I think, since you initially founded Inspiring Capital, and it kind of says what it does on the tin. So it's not just a great and purposeful name, but an organisation that's done some incredible work. And my first question on that, actually, I suppose, is just around how you see how's the world changed in terms of this sort of juxtaposition between social impact and profit, and the fact that probably actually there have to be opposite ends of a spectrum. How have you seen that change over the last 10 years, and maybe what were some of the things that you were able to do with Inspiring Capital on the me, we, world level that kind of brought those two things together?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I agree. And I think just the fact that you say, it says it on the tin is interesting, because 10 years ago, and still to some extent, everyone thought I was a VC, right? Inspiring capital with money.
Yeah.
Which I liked. I liked the mistake, because, of course, for us, it's always been human capital.
Yeah.
And I think just your framing of that question, that it's obvious that that's what we do. Obviously, we have a history, and so that. But I think that is one really interesting change. I mean, the thing I would say that came first is just in the last 2 years, this kind of explicit rejection of the Milton Friedman doctrine that a business's sole purpose is to maximize profit to shareholders. And so I think, the ending in name to some extent, right? Obviously, we still see a very deep legacy of that in so many ways and systems. But, the fact that there's a special section in the New York Times on the 50th anniversary of that, where actually all the writers didn't declare it dead. But just the raising of that, the questioning of that, and very credible, visible, powerful capitalist leaders saying, you know what, that's not correct. And actually, even at the time, he was pretty niche-y, and it sort of got, it sort of snowballed into this huge thing that has really taken us down some really nasty, therein lies our 1.5 Celsius degree temperature rise, really, is that extractive approach to capitalism, and not a longer term view of the other stakeholders like our planet, who supports any shareholder profit that is to be, if you're looking in a proper term. So anyway, I think that the conversation around stakeholder capitalism is incredibly more, it's a conversation, which it wasn't, 10 or 12 years ago. Not that some people weren't doing it. This is work that a lot of people have been doing for a long time, but it was very niche-y, and now, it's quite more mainstream. So that's exciting. Obviously, the entrepreneur change agent in me and is frustrated because I'm like, okay, great, check. Let's scratch that from the record and move on. And it's not moving that fast. But so that's one thing. And then I think the second thing that is even earlier and more nascent and frankly was accelerated by COVID, it was already underway, is the rehumanizing of work and really getting back to this notion that work can be a beautiful, fundamental piece of human dignity and identity and well-being. And it was at one point, and then the industrial era came, amazing technology, great. We have these machines, we have this automation, how great and powerful for reducing poverty, for increasing quality of life, amazing. And then we made humans machines. Turns out we are not, and that's a terrible idea. And so, again, I think COVID, George Floyd, and the racial awakening that has very belatedly provoked, and then economic uncertainty and divide widening, all of that has just made any smart leader of any business in any industry realize, oh, these humans are what matter, and they're the competitive, at this point. Maybe you have a better coder or a worse coder, or you have a slightly faster processor or more chips or whatever. But ultimately, the differentiator now going forward is people. Tech is all totally commoditized. Cash, finance to build your business, totally commoditized. But if you don't have the right people with the right drive and alignment and inspiration to do what you need them to do, good luck.
Yeah, and I always smile. I say I always. I'm smiling a lot when you're talking because it's reinforcing a lot of the work that we do and the reason that that I've jumped ship yet again and set up something purpose fused, and that it is all about people, right? And everybody says that people are your greatest asset, and people have been saying that forever, but the reality is it's the right people, doing the right things in the right way that believe in the same things and can all bring a different perspective and skill set and complement each other on getting to that same place. And so the answer to the next question is if purpose lives with the people in the organization, when I feel like it's historically probably more become popular through marketing, primarily around brands and consumers, and I understand why.
Yeah.
One of the things that was one of the biggest chips on my shoulder I had when I was on the other side of the fence, on the non-profit side, when you'd hear brands saying something but actually not necessarily delivering on it. And so the question I have in this world where work should be about dignity and identity and well-being, and that purpose should be something that's very much glue for humans to support each other and be the best version of themselves. How do you bring that to life in an organization? How do you bring purpose to life as a leader?
Yeah. Look, I think it goes back to this simple, not easy. I think you ask.
Yeah.
You ask humans, what are you here for? Really, that was essentially the nugget of, that discovery and that research that we did with that team at American Express. That's essentially what we were asking, right? And we have ways to make it less intimidating. I talk about purpose pressure, right? And you can just see, no matter who it is, it can be, I forget which CEO it was, but CEO of a mega B Corp, very purpose driven, whatever. And I'm like, so how do you think about your purpose? And he was like, whoa. That's a big question. I'm like, for you, is it? Okay. So anyway, so I think there's this sense of purpose pressure, and we try to really bring that down and lighten that up. And so we have other questions, right? Why are you excited on Monday mornings? Why aren't you excited on Monday mornings? Who did you last go to lunch with? We have other ways to kind of get at it so people don't shut down. But just in the interview process, in your job description, talking about, we're looking for someone who cares about X.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a degree. Arguably, for a lot of things we're learning, you probably don't. But whatever, you can get your technical specs in where it is. But if you talk in the job description, we want someone who cares deeply about clean, organized, analyzable data to help run our company. There are people who care really deeply about that.
Yeah.
And maybe because it's a healthcare company or because it's a green building company, but maybe just because they care about using their their quantitative skills and working in that way. And then in the interview process, asking, and then in onboarding, and then in your one-on-ones, and then at the office happy hour, just, hey, what do you care about? Or borrow your magic moments question. Tell me, what's a magic moment been for you and from your child, from before you were 18? Or I just think, and I think some of this, again, has come out of that industrial and that very kind of American political correctness. And look, we all need to be more empathetic and respectful and conscious of difference. So I don't battle that at all, but it's conscious of difference. It's not, we're all the same and I'm going to act as such. We're not. And that, again, that's the beauty, right? And so I think just helping people get comfortable, it starts with the me, helping people, helping managers, helping leaders. When you become a manager, you need to be guided to do some of this work, and supported and invested so that you know what it feels like. And then you can feel comfortable to ask a teammate, hey, I've been thinking about my purpose and why I'm here. I came up with these few magic moments. Here's one. Would you feel, what's one of yours? Would you feel comfortable sharing that? So, we, as we have content for days, for months on difficult conversations and leading with purpose as a new manager and radical, all the kind of technical things. But ultimately the goal is just to get people comfortable asking themselves the question so that they feel comfortable asking other people the question. So it's part of the conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And I do really appreciate, the simplification of these things because, and I've said it so many times, obviously, in these podcasts alone, but just the organizations are complex. And even though a lot of things are commoditized, knowledge, technology, so on and so forth, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean by simplifying something, it makes it easy. But starting just with asking and just remembering that and keeping it front of mind, everyone can remember and everyone can learn how to ask some meaningful questions to help people dig a little bit more into what it is that drives them and how they can be the best version of themselves and how can they be better supported and different perspectives on doing that. And as long as then you listen and then you act on it to provide some support, then you've got a very simple kind of three-dimensional cycle that if everybody does that, if everybody's asking, listening, supporting, then actually it can make an incredible amount of difference to how you perform.
I think the important foundation, right, it really can go a bit to the Maslow hierarchy, because the other piece that's really important that should not be left out is basic well-being, right? And so wages and healthcare and childcare provisions, right? Companies absolutely need to be providing for that basic level of just safety, essentially, right? So that these conversations can happen. So I don't want to make light of the fact that, I am not very interested in that question if I'm worried about a sick kid home or losing my job because I'm home with said sick kid.
No, 100%. And I think that's like comparing the beginning of COVID to maybe, halfway through or where we're at now, where now it's been a lot about reflection and wanting to become a better version of ourselves as a company and supporting our employees and making work more human. But at the time, you're in survival mode and you just got to get through it. So, yeah, no, 100%. And I can't believe we're nearly out of time, actually. This is a little bit better. Because I've actually got so many more questions I want to ask. So we might have to do a follow-up nearer to launch of your book. But
77, as long as I'm still a lucky 7.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll just it won't be at 70 by then, but we'll make it,
17.
So I guess my the last question that I have to ask, because we always end with this, and it's going to be a really awesome one for you because of the nature of the experiences and the career you've had, is digging into those components of purpose around your passion, the impact that you've had on the world from a kind of a me, we world level, and how you put that into practice. So whether it's your purpose statement, which you're welcome to share if you have one you'd like to share, or just breaking it down into those three areas. If you were to describe Nell in 3 words or 3 sentences around passion, impact, and application, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, it's a great framework. I really like that equation. So my purpose statement does indeed link to what I had jotted down in our prep notes for passion, and that is that I lovingly wrangle ideas and people to make work purposeful for all of us. I ride horses and have grown up doing that, and so I have this kind of cowgirl alter ego. The inspiring cowgirl specifically is my LinkedIn kind of bio. But, my passion really is around connecting ideas and people to improve outcomes. Like it's pretty, look, I did 10 years of nonprofit work that was very direct service, like knowing the refugee mothers in our community and knowing their 4-year-olds and knowing their nightmare patterns and suicidal ideations and developing programs with a social worker to help them get better, right? Like very visceral and frontline. It was incredible. It was exhausting and heart-rending. But ultimately, it didn't feel as satisfying and as purposeful to me because I really have this sense of like, I'm a nerd. I like to like optimize things, much to the dismay of my husband and friends sometimes. I can't not optimize whatever it may be. And so that really is my purpose, is connecting ideas and people from different places and disciplines and times and geographies to make X better, whatever X might be. The application in this long chapter of my life, and I think for a while more, it's about making work healthier and fairer and more inspiring, so more purposeful ultimately. And the impact that I see from that, we call them authentic ahas, which we got from a partner at Kraft Heinz, who's a brilliant leadership development person. And, and seeing these authentic ahas in a workshop or in a leadership team retreat that I'm facilitating, or in an email back to a Forbes article that someone's like, hey, I want to hear more, or in an audience of a keynote, or over Zoom, a little bit hard, but just seeing those little sparks, and I often don't see what happens down the road. I don't know what happens on that person's team the next day or the next month. We have some longer term relationships and I hear some glowing feedback. I don't get to hear or see it all. But when I'm in that great place and connected to that fire or star of the universe, I know that that's really powerful and that that's really impactful to pass some part of that on to other folks. So it takes a little bit of that faith or that extrapolation to imagine how it's playing out in that more direct impact way. But for me, this level of change is really, really satisfying.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, because I love the analogy on just igniting sparks and just the little sparks all over the place from. Obviously, that you've been able to amplify and scale through the application of your work, and the book's going to take that to a whole another level, which I've already signed up for what I can sign up for at this point, and very much looking forward to reading it and staying in contact in between now and then. But for everybody else here, where we'll put this in the bio as well and in the notes, but where's a good place for people to find you online if they want to learn a little bit more about Inspiring Capital or about your book?
Yeah, so certainly LinkedIn is the channel where I'm kind of day-to-day most active and plugged in. And so starting to coordinating with the publisher to drip like advanced content and pieces of the book already now. So that's a great spot, and really invite engagement on that. It's really fun to see the conversation picking up, questions or comments or experience. And then secondly, NellDerickDebevoise.com has a sign up to get that free free excerpt of the book when it's available this fall. And you can pre-order either the paperback or ebook for when it's actually out in February. So those are the two best references. InspiringCapital.ly is under a bit of a rehaul. So by September, there should be clear information about all of this that we're doing. But in the meantime, find me on LinkedIn if you're curious for more.
Magic. Well, we will put all the hooks and handles and links in the notes when this goes live. But Nell, just thanks so much for sharing your time with us. You've been incredibly busy kind of being on the other side of these conversations. So I appreciate your patience with me, and you can give me a review afterwards and teach me some better questions to ask. But
these are great. I loved it.
I just love, obviously, really appreciate the fact that you've been so in depth in the academic side of this from a very early stage, and then being able to bring it to life through Inspiring Capital, and now again with the book as well, and for you sharing some of your personal experiences and everything else to ignite these sparks everywhere. Thanks again. Really appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to speaking again soon.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you. It was a delight.
Okay, cheers now.
Talk soon. Bye.